Scipio's invasion of Africa completely changed the strategic board. Rome was no longer on the defensive. They were the aggressors. Scipio made a brilliant diplomatic move, allying with the Numidian king Massinissa, a masterful cavalry commander who had turned against Carthage. Forced to abandon Italy after 15 years, Hannibal returned to defend his homeland. The weight of an empire now rested on his shoulders. But the army Hannibal now commanded was not the one he had in Italy. Though he had his veterans, the majority were newly recruited, inexperienced conscripts. In contrast, Scipio commanded a veteran Roman infantry, hardened by the campaigns in Iberia. The decisive battle of the Second Punic War was set to take place on a plain near Zama. Before the battle, two of history's greatest generals met face to face, for the first and last time. But for Scipio and Rome, it was too late for peace. They wanted total victory.
Let us choose this path.
Hannibal opened the battle by unleashing his 80 war elephants, hoping to shatter the Roman formation. But Scipio had anticipated this. Instead of a solid line, he had arranged his maniples in columns, creating open lanes through his formation. With the elephants neutralized, Scipio unleashed his own greatest weapon. His new ally, Massinissa's Numidian cavalry, gave him an overwhelming advantage in cavalry, the very weapon that had always been Hannibal's. Now the infantry of both sides were left to decide the battle's fate. Hannibal's veterans from the Italian campaign fought with immense bravery and caused many difficulties for the Romans. When the battle was in the balance, the Roman Numidian cavalry returned and charged into the rear of Hannibal's formation. This was the final blow. Attacked from both sides, Hannibal's army broke. It was the first and last decisive defeat in Hannibal's legendary military career. The defeat at Zama put an end to the Second Punic War, and to Carthage's status as a great power. Rome imposed brutally harsh peace terms, a Carthaginian peace. They lost all territory, surrendered their fleet, paid a crippling indemnity, and were forbidden to wage war without Rome's permission. In the half-century after Zama, though shackled, Carthage showed incredible economic vitality. By focusing on agriculture and trade, they recovered with astonishing speed. However, this very recovery became a threat in the eyes of many Romans, most notably Marcus Porcius Cato, a veteran of the Second War. After a diplomatic visit, he was shocked by the city's prosperity. He believed that as long as Carthage existed, it would remain a potential danger. The pretext Rome needed finally came from their loyal ally, King Massinissa of Numidia. He continually encroached upon and raided Carthaginian territory. Bound by the treaty, Carthage could only send hopeless appeals to Rome, which were consistently ignored. Finally, in 149 BC, unable to endure any more, Carthage did exactly what Rome had been waiting for. They raised an army to fight Massinissa. This act, though one of self-defense, was a technical violation of the treaty. This was the casus belli Cato's hawkish faction had been waiting for. Rome declared war, but this was not a war of military necessity. It was a war of annihilation, a calculated choice to erase a rival from history. Initially, the Carthaginians, seeing the hopelessness of their situation, attempted to surrender. They accepted all of Rome's initial demands. But once Carthage had surrendered its arms and hostages, the Romans delivered their final, most cruel demand. For a seafaring civilization, this demand was a death sentence. Faced with annihilation, they chose to fight to the end. The people of Carthage turned their city into one giant fortress. Women even cut off their own hair to make ropes for catapults. The siege lasted for 3 years. The people of Carthage resisted with desperate bravery. Finally, in the spring of 146 BC, under the command of Scipio Aemilianus, the Romans breached the final defenses. What followed was one of the darkest chapters in Roman history. The fighting raged street by street, house by house, for 6 days and nights. The Roman soldiers carried out a systematic slaughter. The city, once the jewel of the Mediterranean, was plundered, burned, and utterly razed. The final 50,000 survivors surrendered and were sold into slavery. It is said that Scipio wept at the destruction of a great rival. contemplating the fate of all empires, including Rome's own. They wiped Carthage and its civilization from the maps and memory of mankind. The destruction of Carthage marked the end of an era. Rome became the absolute master of the Mediterranean. But the greatest irony is that the Republic's greatest victory was the very thing that led to its downfall. The explosion of slavery and large estates destroyed the class of small farmers, the backbone of the army. These social tensions would lead to a century of civil war and ultimately the fall of the very republic that had built the empire. The war had left deep scars on not only Carthage, but also on Rome itself. Victory had given Rome wealth beyond imagining, streams of silver, grain, slaves, and territory. Yet this sudden abundance was poison. The spoils of conquest flowed into the hands of the elite, widening the gulf between rich and poor. Great estates consumed the countryside, while dispossessed peasants crowded into Rome, swelling the restless urban masses. For centuries, Rome had prided itself on the resilience of its farmer soldiers, the citizen militia who had fought and bled for the Republic. Now their extinction began. The destruction of Carthage also sent the signal to the wider Mediterranean. Resistance against Rome was futile. Cities from Greece to Spain understood that no rival would be spared. At the same time, the spectacle of total annihilation haunted the Roman imagination. For some, it was a warning. For others, a lesson in the brutal arithmetic of power. The phrase, "Carthage must be destroyed," became a grim maxim echoing in Roman politics long after the city was gone. In the decades that followed, new figures arose, reformers like the Gracchi, ambitious generals like Marius and Sulla, and eventually men such as Pompey and Caesar. They inherited a republic made stronger abroad, but weaker at home, richer in empire, but poorer in civic virtue. The Punic Wars had given Rome supremacy, but they had also sown the seeds of its own transformation. The republic that had once fought for survival was now an empire, and empires, by their nature, come with a price. The 118-year conflict between Rome and Carthage shaped the Western world. It is a story of adaptation, of brutality, and of the price of empire. A legacy both glorious and tragic, whose echoes still resonate today. And in the ruins of Carthage, beneath the sands of Tunisia, those echoes still whisper. The memory of a city that defied Rome, and the warning that every empire carries within itself the seeds of its own destruction.